And that's the topic we're here to talk about today, which is bringing virtue into finance.
Yeah.
So you've already tipped your hand. You think finance is in crisis.
Yeah.
When people look at finance, particularly in the political context, they think, regulation. Fix it, get in there. And your argument in The Wisdom of Finance, which I love, is values-based, and then take it from there.
Sure. So first, we should do a little diagnosis with what's wrong with finance. The first piece that's wrong with finance is just in terms of its public standing. It's just remarkably low.
Yeah.
And we're 10 years after the financial crisis and should be no surprise. The second thing is there is a real problem, not just perception. There's a problem in finance, which is too much of the industry is associated with value extraction and not enough with value creation. And that's a genuine problem that we have to kind of address and deal with, and kind of stop talking about finance as God's work. We have to kind of come to terms with that problem.
Now, let me interrupt you quickly, though. Explain to people what you mean by extracting value versus creating value, Mihir.
Sure. I mean, just broadly, what we think is when entrepreneurs do things and when governments do things that are positive, it's 1 + 1 = more than 2, right? There's some value creation that happens as a part of that. Value extraction is just a fixed pie, and we're just grabbing as much as we can. And a lot of finance, not a lot, but chunks of finance have degraded into that, which is there's a fixed pie, I'm taking a bigger slice than everyone else. And that's the problem. And that, of course, I think if you really look hard at it in the last 3 decades, a lot of the problems that people perceive in capitalism today about income inequality, about a lot of different things, have to do with the way finance has changed in the last 30 years. So the question is what to do about it. And there are some candidate solutions, 2 of which I think are very unpromising. One of which is just complete outrage, which is to shout Occupy. And I think that's complicated and problematic for all kinds of reasons. Second is to regulate it, and I think that's problematic because, a lot of regulators are captured, to be frank.
Captured?
Captured in the sense that a lot of regulators are captured to the industry, or captured by the industry.
So they pretend to regulate, but they're not really regulating.
Yeah, that's exactly right, as are legislators. So we shouldn't expect that much. And then, of course, we know that a lot of regulation goes wrong because of the unintended consequences of that regulation. And we can talk about some of those proposals. So, my sense of things is to look deep into what has gone wrong with finance. And so one of the things that's gone wrong with finance is we've lost the humanity in finance. The revolution of the last 50 years in finance, which has been fantastic as a scholar of finance, has been the elegance of the models, the quantification that goes along with that, and the science that has become part of finance. In that process, though, we lost the humanity underneath finance, and specifically, finance became about spreadsheets and screens and stopped being about the people behind those things. Mm-hmm. So one of my efforts, and there's kind of several different efforts, one of the efforts in The Wisdom of Finance is to say, let's bring back some humanity to finance, and the way you do that is you reconnect finance to the humanities. Mm-hmm. Which is a way of saying, actually, once you discover in the humanities a lot of the lessons of finance, you can link these 2 worlds. I experience this every day. I teach at the business school and at the law school at Harvard, and I cross the river routinely. And the skepticism that the college and the university looks at the business school with, which is that we're vaguely evil, and the skepticism that many people in the business school look at the humanities with, which is they don't have that much to offer, is really problematic.
Right.
And so we have to bridge that. And I actually think there's a huge amount of richness there so that people no longer perceive finance as vaguely evil. And we come to appreciate that by relinking ourselves to the humanities and those stories, we can start to actually conduct finance in a better way, because then we won't get lost in the spreadsheets and screens as much.
Stories which at their center have human beings and hopes and dreams and creation and all of those fuzzy words that you don't hear about in movies like The Wolf of Wall Street.
Well, for sure.
Right?
In fact, it was so fun to do this book because it was just a great exploration of all the ways in which finance is portrayed in culture. And particularly recently, it's just terrible. Historically, there are kind of more nuanced portrayals of finance, but recently it's just been terrible.